Yeah, thank you for this opportunity to present. This is not a basically scientific study, but it's more of an information sharing and also give some food for thought for all the key stakeholders who are sitting here. It's a part of a larger study that was done to develop a NCD meter for standardization of interventions in workplaces, as well as develop a minimum guidelines for prevention and control of NCDs and mental disorders in India. So what we did was, we wanted to follow a bottom-up approach and gather the perception of stakeholders who may be in different workplaces. Industries is not the only kind of workplace in this country. So we wanted to gather the perception of stakeholders from different workplaces as to what they feel, whether they really feel that NCDs are a health priority in workplaces. Are there any workplace interventions that can be done to reduce NCDs? Are these interventions feasible? So it is basically a cross-sectional perception of stakeholders across the country as a part of a larger study. So we did an e-survey. The stakeholders were approached through personal contacts, snowballing, and WhatsApp groups of people of the expert group who were a part of a larger task force to develop this minimum set of guidelines. So a survey questionnaire was prepared, validated, and sent as a Google form link to these stakeholders, and responses that were received by end of October 30th were included, and these were the stakeholders, these were the different sections in the questionnaire, and this was the data that was collected in this questionnaire. So I will just skip all this. Coming to the results, so around 140 stakeholders who were personally selected. You can say it's not a random sampling, it's more of a convenient sampling, so representation is highly questionable, but still the information that we derived is interesting. So most of them do feel that NCDs are a burden, even though they are not occupational disorders as such. NCDs are to some extent a health priority in workplaces, up to the tune of, and these were the list of NCDs whom they perceived that it's a priority in workplaces. And among those who perceived, when we asked about what kind of interventions are basically required to reduce these NCDs, and we observed that if you look at the purple, so the red line is basically among whether they felt that these interventions are needed. Purple line is basically they felt whether it was feasible to implement, and yellow line is both. They felt that this intervention works and it's also feasible to implement. And we just see there's a gradual decrease in proportion of people who really told that it's both needed and feasible. So only 47% of the stakeholders felt that an NCD committee or having a dedicated budget to implement NCD interventions are actually needed as well as feasible to implement. So there's a need to implement, to strengthen this part. As far as screening is concerned, just 63% of the stakeholders felt that screening for NCDs and the risk factors is really needed as well as feasible to implement. So that means to say that 6 out of 10 stakeholders really feel that screening is feasible. It's useful as well as feasible, but in most industries we do regular screening for NCDs. And there was a very low perception for having pre-placement screening for NCDs. As far as interventions for NCD management, there was a low buy-in for tying up with medical colleges or any other health departments for implementing NCD. So basically it means to say that they want to have their control on site. As training also, it was even less, around 49 to 50% felt that training employees as NCD volunteers are certainly going to make some impact. So, as far as to enhance the employee participation, there was a big thumbs down for linking the health status with career promotions or incentives. So most of the stakeholders felt that linking your health status in the form of indices and link it up with promotions or career is really not, they're not interested in that. And also having employee role modeling, which is commonly done in most workplaces, and also classifying employees based on their NCD risk, they all felt that only 44 to 50% people felt that it's needed, it's also feasible to implement. That means to say that there is a perceived implementation gap, that is feasibility of implementing these interventions, and these need to be accounted whenever we are trying to make some kind of tools or guidelines that can be uniformly implemented across workplaces in India. So this is the final, from a plethora of interventions that were suggested, these were the final list of interventions which the stakeholders felt that it is needed as well as it's feasible to implement in workplaces to reduce NCDs. And using these interventions that they reported to be feasible, we closed this study with the following recommendations: that using this information, we need to develop a minimum set of guidelines to address the NCDs and NCD risk factors and mental disorders in workplaces, as well as pilot test these guidelines to understand the implementation feasibility as well. So after this study, what we did was we developed an NCD meter, which is a kind of a objective tool that can be used by any workplace and conduct a rapid assessment. At the end of the assessment, they can give a quantitative score, an objective score as to the preparedness level of a particular workplace with respect to management of NCDs. After using these NCD meters, they can take the minimum set of guidelines that was developed and then implement the same and monitor it year on year. So this descriptive study basically provided bottom level information for us to develop the NCD meter and subsequently the minimum set of guidelines. I would like to place on record and thank all the experts, many of whom are in this room, who have provided valuable inputs for us to develop the NCD meter as well as the minimum set of guidelines. Unfortunately, COVID came, and the guidelines as well as the NCD meter is in cold storage in the ministry. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think a very common pain area which you have seen from the stakeholders' point of view.
Yes.
Any question, please?
Sir.
Saying that it is in the ministry and my line ideally, it is not so. If you see the health and wellness center framework and how it's being implemented, how it's being evaluated, a lot of things have been taken in formulating that.
Yes.
The National Health System Resource Center has been working on fine-tuning in the NQAS framework, National Quality Assurance Framework. NCD is, in fact, the biggest component in spreading the health and wellness center across the country. Already 1.5 lakh have been already established in the country. Cooperating for the first time the primary healthcare intervention that are required for NCD.
So what I meant was, the issue is not in court storage. The guidelines and the NCD meter has not been further piloted and used in many places. Yes, sir.
That is 3 years' time.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, I belong to a community workplace, community called an armed forces, where being shape one, we describe being shape one or healthy as the being healthy equal to shape one, which is being incentivized. I need to say at the organizational level, it is to give the relative importance, how healthy you are, how free of disease you are or disability you are, that should be incentivized. And that's again a promotional method, very promotional method from the organizational point of view. I really congratulate you all the participants for making up this NCD meter, which would be helpful with the organizations at the larger scale.
I will be happy to share it with you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.